Joe Rogan just dropped a new interview with Professor of Religion Diana Walsh Pasulka. And it's an amazing conversation. We're going to take a look at a clip of it. And again, anytime I see Joe Rogan, UFOs, aliens, I'm clicking on it. I want to see what's going on. I would imagine you did the same thing, and that's why you're here. So without further ado, let's jump into this clip. If you're new to the channel and you like stuff like this, hit the subscribe button, y'all. We put out a new video every day, 12 p.m. Central Standard Time. I do not miss a day, y'all. And of course, hit that like button. That really helps out the videos, and y'all are so good about doing that. So thank y'all so much for the support there. And of course, comment down below, y'all. What do you think about Diana Walsh Pasulka? Just in particular, her approach. She's kind of quote unquote new to the community, but not really. And yeah, I've seen her in a lot of interviews, right? And just curious what you think of some of the stuff they discuss in this, conversation. So without further ado, let's jump in. Remember, Diana is someone who famously went on this UFO crash excursion with Gary Nolan. They got blindfolded. They had to go out to the desert and go to this secret crash site where they recovered materials. And she was along for this journey. And she started off, again, a professor of religion, started off not really thinking about this. And then as she started to study it, UFOs and abductions would sort of come into play, and she kind of got into it. I mean, there's more to her story than that. But and next thing you know, she's becoming I guess you might say, a full-on believer. She was recently in that Encounters, that Netflix show that came out in September of this past year, 2023, Steven Spielberg produced show. She was in that too. Again, she just did not too long ago, an interview with Jesse Michaels, which was also good. So anyway, enough of me blabbing. Let's play this clip.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
What do you think the UFO phenomenon is?
Yeah, so I think, first of all, that there are a lot of different varieties of it. But when we look at, we were looking at the Francis of Assisi and the kind of historical things and the abductions and things like that, I think that it's been around for a long time, and that these are things that are in communication with us. So what I do in my book, both the books that I wrote about this, is I talk to people who I think represent thousands of people. So each person in the book represents thousands, if not more, maybe many thousands of people who have had experiences and the ways in which they interpret them. So all of the people seem to have had experiences where now what they want to do is they actually want to work for justice in different ways. Like Jose, the veteran in my book, he's working with young people and helping them deal with being addicted to social media and things like that, and helping them get through life, which is really hard right now. And that's what he's doing. And then you look at Dr. Whiteley, right? So she's working in this space where she's trying to, help people deal with the fact that they're seeing things that, that could down planes and things like that. And she's helping people talk about that. She's helping people. Each person is somehow doing what I'm suggesting that I think is an out, this kind of structural injustice that we see. So I think that this is a transformational thing without the drugs, is what's going on. Like some kind of massive experience that people are having, and now it's getting out, and people are being able to talk to each other through Reddit communities and different types of social media. So it is it's we did see religions, when they become viral at one point. We've never seen it in an age where we have digital technology. But
so it is interesting, it's a transformative experience without the drugs. That's an interesting way to put it. And its connection to religion. That's what makes her so fascinating. And her interviews that she's done that I've seen is that connection to religion, right? Because that's talked about a lot in this topic. So that is very interesting. I don't know. What do y'all think about that? If you've had your own experience, is that what it felt like? Sort of a transformative experience afterwards, right? But without drugs. That's interesting. I'd be curious to hear some comments of some of y'all that have had experiences, if that's what it felt like.
This is what we're seeing now.
What do you think the physical objects are?
Well, okay, so this is something that's very interesting. We just looked at the Shroud of Turin. I believe that there are these, I would call them, and this is just my own non-scientific term, interdimensional objects. They're objects that have characteristics of our dimension and some other dimension.
So real quick, I didn't mean to pause there, but when I watched this originally, like that part just always gets me because, and I've spoken about it on this channel before, how do we know what the other properties of another dimension are? How do we know? How can we identify it or even, theorize that based on what we're seeing? Does that make sense? Like, why is that what we go to? What about the evidence leads you to that? And what evidence do we have of another dimension? What it looks like, a reference that we connect it to that. Does that make sense? So we see that evidence. We see what other dimensions, whatever the data set is of that, and we go, oh, this matches. So it might be another dimension. Like, what is going on up there? What is the data set for another dimension? What does that mean? And what are they seeing that makes them say another dimension, interdimensional, right? I keep hearing that over and over. But again, why are they saying that? Who is telling them another dimension? Why is that coming up? How do we know another dimension? We've never been to another dimension. How do we possibly know what it looks like, feels like, a reference to it, a sense, right? Could be something else. What if it's just a portal to another part of the universe? Right? I'm just saying, I don't know. That whole idea, I just don't understand. Right? Pull that thread and it kind of unravels for me. Again, I just don't know where this interdimensional comes from. Like, why say that? How are we coming to that conclusion?
So some other dimension has the capability, or something from some other dimension has the capability of transporting a physical object into our realm.
Or even imprinting onto a physical object. Yeah.
How so?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think
What
that's
do you mean by, what does that mean, imprinting onto
So
a
with the
physical
Shroud
object?
of Turin,
Okay.
we see the imprint of, the image and...
If it's real.
Yeah, if it's real. But it's an anomalous object. So we do have, from Gary Nolan, engineered objects that we don't know how they're engineered, but they...
So those are the metamaterials, right, that are out there that Gary Nolan has studied that have different isotope ratios, the way it's layered and blah, blah, blah. There's more on that if you want to look into that. Just look up, Gary Nolan metamaterials or UFO materials. I've done videos on it here. In fact, I'll put a link in the description for it. Again, this whole idea of where they got this stuff, what does it mean? Physical objects, it can imprint itself. I just don't know what any of that, like, what does that mean and what does that come down to? So it is interesting that they have these materials. And real quick, Sean Kirkpatrick, you're right, recently, the head of AARO, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, had put out, there's a new podcast interview out where he says, like, the materials that TTSA, To the Stars Academy, right, which was Tom DeLonge's venture. Then remember, he was famously on Joe Rogan, and he had like a little piece of material that they had, and they were going to do something with it. Well, Sean Kirkpatrick is saying, oh, we saw that, and it's just a missile shell casing from the 1950s. And Gary Nolan is saying, I have some of that, and there is no way that's what it is. And he's like, I want to see the peer-reviewed documents from Sean Kirkpatrick about that. I mean, y'all, there's a lot going on with Sean Kirkpatrick right now. I'll put a link in the description to an article that he wrote that I just did a video on too as well. And there's just more stuff coming out about him that's just interesting. But anyway, these metamaterials that float around, yeah, it's interesting.
Definitely look like they're, it's off planet. I would call the kinds of things that we see in the historical record interdimensional types of things. Now, how? I don't know, Joe. okay, so I just don't know. But I do think that scientists in the government know that these things exist and they would like to figure it out. And so part of disclosure, the disclosure movement, is outsourcing this and trying to get as many people as possible to help in figuring it out.
What do you think when they use the term donations? What do you think the purpose of that is? If there is an object that is purposely released into our, like I'm sure you're aware of cargo cults,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So with cargo cults, for people that don't know, there's been some islands during World War I and World War II where planes landed there and they left, and these people they created these statues of these planes and they worshiped them. And
they wanted them to come back.
Yes.
Yeah,
wanted them
because
to
they
come
got
back.
food and all
Yes.
kinds of wonderful things from the planes.
Right. And
yeah, like they thought of them as deities.
Right. The same way we
Yeah.
would think of something from
Like
somewhere
this.
else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that in my field has been called the cargo cult, the UFO cargo cult, right? And obviously Tyler and James view these parts as donate. They called it the donation site, right? So giving it the idea
Is that just one theory?
yeah, that's just one theory.
Are there other theories that there's a biological organism that encounters a lightning storm and it actually crashes and there's physical bodies?
Oh yeah,
that
there.
So real quick, this donation thing, right? Tell me what y'all think about that. I'm curious to hear y'all's comments on that.
There is that, yeah.
And the story of that island, right? That's crazy that they would then build these statues and whatever, right? And like, is that what's happened to us, right? That's the theory. And again, that's why she's so fascinating, because she can look at the history of religion and point to like, basically the old adage right here. If you're not new to the community, you've heard this, right? That what people interpreted back in the day as religious experiences were just, right, these ET experiences or interdimensional experiences, right? They were seeing aliens, not gods, but just felt like gods to them, right, in that sense. And, maybe you could argue there is no difference potentially in their mindset, right? So anyway, yeah, curious what y'all think of that. And is that what is happening to us, right? I don't know. I mean, it kind of makes sense that if a God did approach us, we would misinterpret it. Even if he tried to explain it to us. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
There's that
Yeah.
going
What's your
around.
take on that? Because that's one of the things that Grush talked about and some of the other people talked about, that there are biological things that have been recovered.
Well, what impressed me about what he said was that he used the term biologics. And I actually know that term because that's the same term that Tyler was talking about when he was creating materials in anti-gravity spaces on space shuttles and such. So I was wondering, because David Grush does get his information from people allegedly in the programs, but he's never seen these materials that I know of.
I think he has some firsthand experience that he was not able to talk about.
Okay.
That he's alluding to.
Okay.
I
Right.
think, but this
Yeah.
is recent.
With her connections, I find it odd that she doesn't know that detail. Just saying. What do y'all think of that? I just find it odd that she doesn't know that detail, considering who she's closest with. Right? How has she not spoken in depth about David Grush? It would know the extent of what he knows. And his firsthand knowledge, the knowledge of the public's knowledge of David Grush's firsthand knowledge of UFO evidence or whatever is months now. It's been a couple months. I mean, he mentioned it on the Joe Rogan interview that he did in passing, right? So I don't know. I just find it odd that she doesn't know that detail. What do y'all think? Am I overthinking that?
And he's been very careful about how he releases this information and what he's able to release and not able to release. And
Right.
that I was like, okay,
Yeah.
really?
So, I mean, I've not seen any bodies, nor have I seen intact craft, but I also have had, now remember, I don't have a clearance like he has, so I can actually talk about what people have told me. I have had people tell me that, yes, Diana, there are intact craft. I don't know. I mean, maybe. So, I don't know, Joe.
Have you?
I gotta admit, that's a very honest answer from her. Like, I can still tell she's kind of just like, I don't know. I've heard this stuff, but I don't know. I haven't seen it. So that's an honest answer from her. I can respect that. I also find it interesting that she said, he's got a clearance. I don't. So I can talk about what people have told me. Right? So I don't know. It is interesting that David Grush is somehow keeping his security clearance all the while blowing the whistle on the greatest secret, black budget programs in United States history. That fundamentally changes our reality, or what we know of our reality, and does change our reality in that sense. Well, it doesn't change the reality because that is the reality. It changes our knowledge of it, right? Our awareness of it. But because reality is reality, right? We just, our understanding of it changes and our awareness of it, right? Just like the first time we found that there was microscopic, little beings on us and, right, blood cells and that sort of thing. Like, oh my God, what's going on? But yeah, I don't know. I find that interesting. Like, how can David Grush keep a security clearance? Like, the government's like, yeah, we want you to still have your security clearance, but we're going to let you blow the whistle on that. I guess it's not connected because I know that the stovepiping. So I realize the government isn't one entity. I don't know. I do find that interesting. Does that mean something? I don't know. I'm just asking. Again, y'all know me. I'm all about. David Grush gave a list of names, places to go, and said, this is where the alien craft is in bodies. Why we haven't gone there and said yes or no, it's there, is beyond me. It's not like they've come back and said, hey, we went to the places David Grush said, there's no alien craft or bodies. They don't have to tell us what's there. They don't even have to tell us where they went. But they won't even do that. They won't even release a statement that just says, we checked out his stuff. It's bogus. So again, anyone that doubts Grush, I'm just saying, what about that point? Right? Recently, AJ from the Y-Files stopped by Vetted and left a comment on a video here. That's right, y'all. Listen, a lot of people come through Vetted and leave comments. So always check out the comments here. I had made a video on the Y-Files. One video. It's not like I've made a bunch of them. I made one video about it. And AJ saw it, and he came and commented. And that's his position, right? Because my video was about why the Y-Files doesn't trust David Grush. And AJ was just like, look, he's in the intelligence community and, kind of hard to trust anybody like that, right? And again, he claims, I hope I'm wrong, right? Like he wants this to be true. And again, shout out to the Y-Files. Go check that out. I'll put a link in the description of that video if you want to check it out. And yeah, so again, I don't know. But again, what I would say to AJ too is that point, like, okay, what about, he literally gave a treasure map, an alien treasure map, and said, go to these places. There's aliens and UFOs there. And again, our government has not issued a statement being like, David Grush told us some places to go and people, and we did, and it's bogus. They haven't done that. They haven't said we went to those places and there's no UFOs or aliens. Why not? That's so suspicious to me, y'all. That really gives me credence, right? Gives credence to David Grush's claims, at least some of them, right? And again, they just had this hearing where they were like, David Grush's claims are, they're like, the Congress people said, the ones we heard, there's merit to them. So what do you want? I mean, I'm sorry, but there's definitely reason to continue to look into this with David Grush and our craft. My main concern is more just like what happens on the fringes of the UFO community and people's stories and this and that, like the origin of it, right? And that's what I have questions about. Okay, we have this craft and we have these bodies, but from where? Right? That's just, and why are they here? It might be more important to find out why they're here than where they're from. But, one might lead to the other. And if there's multiple different entities visiting us, right? So there's multiple origins. I don't know, y'all. Right? Just nuts.
Studied Bob Lazar.
Okay, yes.
This is
I'm always
interesting.
asked about Bob Lazar.
Yeah.
And I don't know, but I can tell you that people that I've met who are associated with the programs tell me that he's right. Now I know his background and I know, all the things. I don't have an opinion one way or the other, but I can also say that a lot of times people with very disturbing backgrounds, who could be easily discredited are given information. And
that's where we're going to end it, y'all. Look, I'm going to put a link to the rest of that clip if y'all want to watch it, but I do find that interesting, her comments about Bob Lazar. Look, I got something to admit here. I have honestly never really believed Bob Lazar since I've heard the stories. I've never believed it. And even on this channel, I've expressed severe doubt, about his story. And I've looked into a lot of stuff. But I got to admit, and I've been thinking about this recently, so it was interesting that this comment came up. I thought to myself, Patrick, I don't want to get too into my head and too into preconceived notions or ideas I have about things. And just to make sure there's potentially no biases there, because Bob Lazar's story is quite fascinating, I'm going to reset my mind about Bob Lazar and start fresh. A fresh perspective on who Bob Lazar is, what he said, and is there any merit to it? And the last, and I feel the most important question of that, does it even matter? So just want to let y'all know that. And especially hearing Diana say that is interesting. I got to admit, that's not the answer I thought she was going to say when she went to answer that. That's just not what I thought she was going to say. Because look, like in the Jesse Michaels documentary interview with David Grush, he asked him about Bob Lazar, and David Grush says, I don't know anything about him. I haven't heard anything. So think about that. David Grush did an exhaustive investigation into this. Probably the most exhaustive investigation, right, about UFOs. Testified under Congress, gave all the evidence, the entire investigation, and nowhere in it, and in no time during his investigation, did he find anything out about Bob Lazar. Now, was that answer maybe he knows and he just doesn't want to say it? I doubt it, because anything he can't talk about, he just says, I can't talk about that. So I feel like if he would have asked about Bob Lazar, he would have just said, I can't talk about that. Which doesn't necessarily mean Bob Lazar's his story is true. It just means I've heard things about him that I just can't say. I'm not approved to say. Could be he's a fake and I found out, or it could be he's real and I found out. But he just says, I haven't heard anything about that. I just found that interesting too. But hearing Diana say that, I mean, she's got connections to these people, right? So I don't know. Who is telling her Bob Lazar's right in every part of his story? I don't know. But anyway, I am going to take a fresh new look at Bob Lazar and his story. I'm not saying I won't potentially come to the same conclusion, but at least I'll know I gave it my best effort mentally to try to be, intellectually honest with myself as much as I can, as much as anyone can. So I don't know. I'm sure I know a lot of y'all's feelings who are regular vetters on Bob Lazar, but please tell me your comments down below if you want of what you think of him. Maybe just give me your top 3 reasons why you think Bob Lazar is correct. You know, why do you believe him? Why do you believe his story, not him? I guess I should say, because we should separate the man from his story in some sense. So I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong there too. But anyway, yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Definitely interested to hear all of it. So thank y'all again for watching. We'll see you guys tomorrow, 12 p.m. Central Standard Time. As always, remember, vetters, every day's a gift. Peace.